Well, we have a bit of the problem of infinite regress here tonight because I have the honor of introducing Dr. Waters, but I guess if we're not going to regress to infinity, I have to introduce myself.
Yes.
I am Dr. Dennis Bonnet. I taught philosophy at Niagara University for 36 years and was Dr. Waters' boss for about 10 years as chairman of the department.
I've never forgiven him.
I have the honor of introducing your professor tonight, the founder of this School of Philosophy, the Aquinas School of Philosophy. Dr. Raphael Thomas Waters has a distinguished career. He was born in Sydney, Australia, actually became a professional pharmacist originally, managed his own pharmacy, and at the same time studied philosophy at the Aquinas Academy, which was a rather unique institute headed by philosopher and theologian Father Austin Woodbury. And after he temporarily left Sydney, he went to the University of Montreal, where he got 3 canonical and civil degrees, terminating with the D.Ph., the Doctor of Philosophy, all earned magna cum laude. He was awarded the prize for the great books of the Western world there. He returned to Australia and taught at the Aquinas Academy himself for some years, and then returned to Canada and taught at the University of Ottawa for some 7 years before coming to Niagara University in 1976. He taught from 1976 until 2004, retiring 6 months after I did. He has been very active in lecturing and appearing and reading papers at various organizations, universities, radio and television in Australia, Canada, and the United States over the years. He's been elected the national president of the Scholars for Social Justice, and particularly important is his acceptance as a member of the Catholic Academy of Sciences in the United States of America, where he holds the offices of Vice President and Registrar. I say this is particularly important because this is patterned after the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and has a limited lifetime membership of 70 members. So this is a very prestigious group, not unlike the French Academy in France as well. He's a member of various professional organizations, and he has been dedicating his time to writing and speaking and to this school, very much so, since his retirement in 2004. He's published articles and continues to contribute to books on many social problems, including drugs in the mind, capital punishment, capitalism, homosexuality, abortion, euthanasia, eugenics, education, parental authority in education, and so forth. So we are very fortunate tonight to have with us Dr. Waters, and particularly we are indebted to him for having on his own initiated this Aquinas School of Philosophy. How long has it been now? 3 years? 4 years?
4 years.
4 years. And as you can see, it is a going, vibrant institution, well witnessed by all of you here tonight. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Waters.
Thank you, Dr. Bonnet. We have been a good team over the years, I think. We've worked together a lot. And it looks like we're running short of a few chairs there. However, before we start tonight, what I'd like to do is to go through some preliminary notes that need to be said. I know from past experience that many of you want to hear what I've got to say too about this. What I would suggest is, with questions, that you hold them till the break at 7:30 or till the end of the class, possibly. The reason being this is all being taped and discs are made, and to tell you the honest truth, they're going to go all over the world. There are people in New Zealand who will be listening to what I'm saying tonight, people in Australia and Canada. Mais les autres en France, c'est notre chose. In France, we have to translate, so that was meant to be a joke. It wasn't funny. Anyway, where were we? So, but there are people in Canada, at least most of the people I lived amongst there have some smattering of English, although I have had some very funny situations where the people couldn't speak English. And, however, we overcame that. Sometimes we hear someone say, no one has the truth, or there is no truth, or do you think you have the truth, or perhaps truth is only relative. These are just a few notes I want to read just to make things clear for the moment. Whatever that means, truth is only relative. I've not heard any of these people question the truth of their own statement. Those people who say there is no truth, they claim that is truth, that there is no truth. It's self-contradictory. If you're one of these and are unwilling to learn that you might be wrong, then it is questionable as to whether you should be in any school. Such a de-educated mind is often quite difficult to deal with because the will is in control more than the intellect. We'll be examining that a lot in this course. I can remember two young ladies from the University of Sydney, which was my first university to study in, where I studied pharmacy in the medical school there. And two young ladies came to me one day and said something about holding things up with a little bit of ridicule and saying, you've got to be critical, you know. And I said, oh, what does that mean? By the time I'd finished with them, they said, well, you mustn't be too critical. They got scared because I was being more critical than they were. They don't know the meaning of the word critical. There's a special science, part of philosophy, dedicated to criticism, to a critical evaluation of human knowledge. So, the anti-intellectual attitude can only be overcome by the development of a good will. Thus, virtue is a necessity for true scholarship. For the ability to learn, that is, teachableness, is a virtue with the name of docility. This is not the same as dumbness or stupidity or gullibility. This means that you are able and willing to learn and to follow through on something. You're willing to listen to an argument, think about it, reflect over it, and then consent to whatever truth there might be in the argument. I remember a young man said to me once, he was French-Canadian, he said, I don't think anything is certain. And I said, nothing? No. You're certain of that. I'm not certain of that. I said, but you're certain that you're not certain of that. He said, but I'm not certain that that either. I said, well, you're certain that you're not certain that you're not certain. But you're utterly certain of it. Oh, hold it, I said. I led him into a trap. I'm a bit confused. Let's start again. You're saying you can be certain, I'm saying you can't be certain. No, you're saying you can be certain. Ah, so you're certain of the difference, eh? It shook him down to his boots. He had dropped out of the University of Montreal, where we're all students, and he then asked the university, could he come back? And the reason he gave, he said, some idiot in this faculty, it was a faculty of philosophy there, full faculty, not just a department, some fellow I met made me feel silly, so I want to come and straighten myself out. It was Father Martinelli, the secretary of the faculty, who told me that. So, on the other hand, there's a vice currently in use. This is called curiosity. In Latin, we call it curiositas. Curiosity is a vice. Studiosity is a virtue. Studiosity means you are prepared to go through and follow the thing up and examine it properly. Curiosity, people jump from one thing to another. There are many teachers of philosophy, perhaps I should say most of them, today offer courses which pick out bits and pieces of the history of philosophy and hope that the students will find their own philosophy. We shall be presenting the traditional philosophy which has been examined, thoroughly tested, and its truths proven by the best philosophers of the past 26 centuries. As Aristotle showed, it belongs to the same treatise to critically evaluate as it does to make a presentation. The mere presentation of someone's teaching without examining it to discover whether it is true or not is foolish. St. Thomas, the prince of philosophers, said that a judge has to see both sides of a question in order to discover where justice lies. St. Thomas certainly set a good example, for there are more objections to his own teaching presented by him than I have seen in any work outside the Aristotelian and Thomistic school. In one of his works, he gives 27 objections to his own teaching. I don't know anybody in this contemporary world that does that. In fact, he gives 27 objections, 27 contrary objections, 27 contrary to that, and 27 contrary, something like that. Your mind is in a twirl trying to keep up with that. I have samples of his writing. He wrote in the 13th century, by the way. I have samples of his writing. It's almost unintelligible. It's so dense. It's said that he dictated to 6 secretaries at the same time in Latin. His work is stupendous. Nobody in the history of the world has written the same as Thomas Aquinas has. That's why we named this school after him. So, in the 4th century B.C., Aristotle summed up all the teachings of those who went before him and showed the truth or error in their teachings. St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century, that is about 1700 years later, in a similar way drew upon the whole history of Western thinking before his time and then erected their teaching into a new and higher synthesis. Most people, even many scholars, know this tradition from hearsay, not from examining the works themselves. Many who think they have studied some of his teaching have studied conclusions very often with little attention to the evidence. These are called peeping Thomists. They become doubting Thomists. They become timid Thomists. We must never forget that evidence alone counts in philosophy, not authority, not belief, evidence, evidence alone. Therefore, we should start this course with holding judgment which each of the issues until we have understood that issue and then resolved any apparent difficulties. This should be done for each issue one at a time. Brainwashing or indoctrination, which is practiced by television, consists in the formation of a habit in the will to which the intellect becomes obedient. That's why I call it an anti-intellectualist age. This anti-intellectualism is typical of the 20th century, and it results in a poorly formed public opinion, and you can see it reflected in the election discussions that are taking place. This gives greater intensity to the indoctrination forced on men, women, and children. The particular doctrine which expresses this blind faith is called political correctness. That's why we founded this school, to do something worthwhile for this great, wonderful country and this wonderful people. That's why it costs nothing to attend this course. All it needs is for you to come. No prerequisites. Some of the best philosophers I've ever seen had no university degree whatsoever. I've met men like that. I must confess, most of them were in Australia. The Aquinas Academy, where I first graduated, and although they couldn't grant degrees, and then I first taught there, the people I taught were MDs, Ph.D.s in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry, you name it. They were the students we had at the Aquinas Academy. It was unique in the world. And that's what I tried to do here, to establish this school in imitation of the Aquinas Academy. By the way, these notes, I'll send them to you on the computer. So make sure I've got your computer address. So, yet in spite of all I've said, people who reject what we study, that is critically evaluated, what is critically evaluated, and what has been justified by utterly certain scientific proofs developed throughout 25 centuries by the wisest men. There are many amateur philosophers who will not study what we teach and certainly will not discuss it with us. They continue to wallow in their errors. Remember, evidence alone counts in philosophy. Evidence alone gives strength to our arguments. We argue from principles which we have shown in the 2 sciences of metaphysics and philosophical psychology to be utterly certain. We shall see that as we go along. However, we little philosophers will examine the arguments of great minds, and yes, even some of the puny minds, such as Mill, Bentham, and Kant. These men are greatly exaggerated their importance. I wouldn't be stupid enough, I hope, to write some of the things that I've read in some of these men's writings. Above all, we shall examine the profound arguments and their conclusions by the greatest of all philosophers. For example, Aristotle, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas. They were philosophers, remember, writing philosophy, not theology. They wrote theology too. But when they wrote philosophy, they knew what they were doing. Cajetan, one of the great minds. Maritain, Woodbury, and others. Their scientific arguments have been set out in true systematic form by such scholars as Cajetan, Bagnès, Jean Poinceau, Fagerty, Higgins, Cox, and a host of others. I shouldn't have put all that in, perhaps. These present the matter in a form suited to the contemporary mind. Please remember, understanding is the desired purpose of our studies, not mere memorizing. We need to develop the habit of the sciences so that we can make judgments of particular cases for ourselves. We have to learn to think for ourselves, my friends. We do not want to see you leave possessing so many opinions which you can repeat in suitable situations. This would be a mindless activity, just like someone who has been indoctrinated. We must be formed so that we can make intelligent judgments, draw intelligent conclusions in our practical lives with sound reasoning. Now, seats up here. We have plenty of chairs at the back. Now, why study philosophy? 1, it gives you a chance to examine the whole of reality and to make sense of it all. 2, it makes you better in any other study, science or art. It improves. That's why the men that we had at the Aquinas Academy in Sydney were university professors from all over the place. Students, I'm talking about. 3, it gives you a better sense of values. You cannot be perfect in any study without the corresponding part of philosophy. Geology, the philosophy of geology. Botany, the philosophy of botany. Zoology, the philosophy of zoology. Psychology, political science, languages, law, mathematics, medicine, the arts, and so on. 5, philosophy develops your power of thinking. Unfortunately, there's more fashion among philosophers than among people with their fashions in clothing. Consider at the present time, for example, the following current problems. Atheism is on the rise. I have never seen, and I have about 7,000 books at home, and I have never seen an atheist who could present a sound argument. Moscow Radio broadcast this some years ago through CKO in Canada. They had a question session. You cannot prove there's a God, said the woman in answer to a letter from somebody written into them. You cannot prove there's no God. But the more you learn about science, the more you learn that there's no God. This is what they said from Radio Moscow. I was listening to it. It was in English. I was listening to it. And it was rebroadcast by Radio CKO in Canada. Now, note what they admitted. You cannot prove there's no God. That is true. She said, you cannot prove there is a God. That is false. But when I see the books that are being put out for students today, anthologies they're called, groups of writings of different professors or different writers, and not once do they face the truths or face the proofs, the scientific proofs, that there is a God. It's absolutely unbreakable, those 5 proofs. We shall see some of them. We'll have occasion towards the end of the course to see some of that. Atheism's on the rise, but many men like Dawkins know nothing about the scientific proofs. They set up false argumentation and then they knock that down. 2, the contenders for the presidency of the United States appear to know little, if anything, about the measure of taxation which a government can morally charge of people. There's a specific measure of this which we study in ethics. 3, does man have free will? 4, what is a right? How do you determine whether something is a right? 5, how do we measure justice? 6, can we justify socialism or capitalism? What exactly are these? 7, is there life after death? 8, can we be certain of anything? Some say death and taxes, but they should be saying death, taxes, and shipping and handling. One word of warning, and why I give these words of warning is based upon experience with students in the past. Please remember that philosophy is not religion. what they should be saying is not theology, not religion. Religion's a practice. That's theology is the subject that studies those things. It is often confused with theology by people who have never studied philosophy and never studied religion. A young woman from Haiti, when I was living in Ottawa, lived in the apartment above my apartment. I met her in the elevator one morning. We greeted each other. Bonjour, mademoiselle. Bonjour. That's where we spoke French there. And she said, what is it you do again? I said, philosophy, professor of philosophy. She said, oh, that's right. That's the same as religion, isn't it? And I said, not at all. In fact, if you put theology on that door, that wall, and philosophy on that wall, all other human knowledges lie between. Yet, they do deal often with similar stuff. Does man have a rational soul? Does man survive after death? What is justice, etc.? So, it's small wonder that those who are not well educated do not understand that they're two diverse subjects. But I throw that in because somebody will bring that up to me sooner or later. Please remember, this is because philosophy deals with ultimate questions that it is not religion. We prove that there is life after death and some of what this consists in. Relation with each other subjects will be explained throughout the course. In this course we teach, not just read something, not just talk. We employ a whiteboard, we record on tapes and discs which can be made available to everyone. The text will be issued on the computer. I'll be sending out, I've had a lot of trouble this week, as the people who are here first heard, with my computer this week. I'm with Yahoo. They behave like a bunch... Pardon?
That explains it.
That explains it. Yeah, they behave like a bunch of Yahoos, frankly. Anyway, Gulliver's Travels, I apologise to him for that statement. But so we'll get started on our course. And I'll be sending those few notes out, just so for those who came late, they could read them up. What we would like you to do is to fill in a card with these. What am I treading on? What that is. With these things on the cards. The people who came in late would very much like to have a record of who's here, and also to sign in. You'll be asked to do that each night that you come here. We do have hopes that sometimes we'll be able to issue a certificate, but only to those who have been attending classes. Now, this kind of course is very systematic. Imagine if you were studying geometry, say, and you left out a few classes. You'd be in trouble. Or algebra, you'd be in trouble. It is worth the sacrifice to come to every class and follow the systematic development. It takes a little while to dawn on you, but it starts to come, and then it's an exciting feeling. I remember it when I started the Aquinas Academy. By the way, I was one of the two people who was there for many years, for many years, and the first to bring my doctorate back there. But anyway, that's another question. But it took me those days or years, or months rather, to gradually see the full import of it. And then I saw how systematic it was. By the way, what we want is your name, address, telephone number, email address, and how you knew about the school. What your information came from, if you would, please. I tried to get this out to you. Some of you may have got it. Did you get the plan, the outline of the course? You got it. They let me through just once, and then they stopped me again. What would come up on my screen is, oops, then we're feverishly trying to sort out a problem. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, I see it all the time.
Wasn't it terrible? I don't know. This week I think, look, I tore my hair out. I was getting so upset with the thing. Right at the beginning, you should have the 2 pages of the outline. Then I'll give you the principles of reason. We'll talk about that presently. But right at the start, we've got to... Hello, some part of my notes missing. I took them out and forgot to put them back. That's all right. The nature of philosophy. What is philosophy? I'll give you the definition, then I'll write it on the board. Well, first of all, what is a science? What exactly is a science? Certain knowledge through causes. That's the definition of a science. Certain knowledge through causes. In other words, will it rain tomorrow? Well, one opinion's as good as another. One might be better informed and say, oh, my corn's aching. I think it will be. That was my late mother, by the way. It'll be raining tomorrow, Mum. Just a minute. She feels her corns. Yes, it will be raining tomorrow. But certain knowledge, not just a casual opinion or a suggestion. That's what a science is. And you want to find that information through their proper causes. What causes that to be like that? Chemistry is about substantial changes from one substance to another. That's what chemistry is specifically about. And physics comes in to study motion, movement in these things. But the question is, you want to know why these things change, why changes take place from one substance to another. So that's the nature of a science. Now, is philosophy a science? Yes. Only it has a broader definition. It's certain knowledge of all things through their ultimate causes in the light of the principles of reason. Now, I'm going to put that on the board. I'm a little worried about erasing this. This is what philosophy is. Certain knowledge of all things through their ultimate causes. By the way, this will come to you on the computer tomorrow, I hope. Through ultimate causes in the light of the principles of reason. This is all very simple and will be very readily seen by you when you get the hands on some stuff. Principles of reason. Now, I'm underlining the specific differences that make it different from other sciences. Chemistry. How do you know when a change takes place? You use your peepers. You look at it. You look at the thing and see the change takes place. Different color. Or maybe a white stuff is precipitated down to the bottom of the test tube or something. When you study botany, everything you do ultimately is observe, observe, observe. Daddy Forceps, Professor Forceps, we used to call him Daddy Forceps. This was like a long string bean. A student went to visit him one day at his home, and he could hear his wife calling out, "Charlie can't find me, Charlie can't find me." Boy, did that get amongst the students. Professor Forceps says, a student comes to him and says, "Professor, is cobalt chloride soluble or not?" "Go and try it," he told us. He always says, "Go and try it." Experience. What's the Latin word for experience? Experimentum. In the French language, we use the word expérience, which means experience or experiment. I remember René Legris said to me one day from Radio Canada, "J'avais une expérience aujourd'hui." I had an experience today. And I said, what happened? She said, "What do you mean, what happened?" "What you're saying to me, I did an experiment in the laboratory today." So an experiment is just an experience, that's all. So sciences generally, you have to use your senses. You have to see something, observe. Some sciences are reduced to observation all the time. Chemistry, botany, zoology, experimental physics, etc. You have to observe, observe, observe. But in this science, you first of all get your data. Does beauty exist? Yes, it does. There's one. You only need one for a philosophical fact. Just one's all you need. Beauty exists. Then you shine the principles of reason on that. Certain principles that guide the human intellect, reasoning. And then you come to a conclusion. There's a cause of beauty in the world, etc. We'll see all that as we go along. Don't be bamboozled by a few things at the beginning. It's quite easy for that to happen. You'll settle in and you'll get to know this quite well. So the method, the philosophical method, what philosophy is this rational science in which we have reasoning. You know, every man is mortal, Bob is a man, therefore Bob is mortal. There's a reasoning. And we'll learn more about that. There's a special part in our course for that. So what we're doing is using reasoning, but one of the things we use is a principle of reason. Another one we use is a fact. Then we draw a conclusion from that. We'll see that in practice as we go along. I will be issuing 2 pages of principles of reason. I have never seen them in any book anywhere. I have a special book on principles of reason, but what I've set up is just 2 straight pages with these about 40 principles of reason on them. And I wish to goodness I'd had them when I was a student. But I did that for your convenience. I think it'll help grasp what a principle of reason is. This is one, for instance, in logic. If 2 things agree with a third, they agree with each other. Here's another one. The whole of something is greater than its part. Here's another one. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. The philosopher is the guardian of the principles of reason. We'll see these and show how to deny them leads us into total error. So, the philosophical method then is to draw a conclusion and, like lamps light up this page so I can see it, the light lights up the page. In our minds, principles of reason light up the reasoning. Principles of reason show us the reasoning. We'll see it as we go along. Just yet, you're only just getting a few fundamentals, and these will be explained in greater depth as we go. So there are 2 modes. My next point, C. I've given A and B and C. 2 modes of science. One is experimental, that's based upon observation. The other is philosophical. Now, let me explain that in another way. Is everybody finished? Anybody not finished with this yet? We can explain it to you later anyway. I want to get it off the board. Where's my eraser? We have to carry our own equipment because other people use this classroom, and I've already discovered if you want to keep your equipment, you hang on to it. There are 2 kinds of science. This one is called empirical. In other words, observational, if you like. It's also called noetic. Now, noesis in Greek means knowledge. Peri means around, perimeter. Let's take silver, for instance. The metal silver. It melts at what, 998 and boils at 2000 degrees. It has a beautiful conductivity of heat, conducts heat very well. Saucepans made of silver would be marvellous. Pretty costly though, wouldn't they? Heat and, say, electricity, conducts electricity. It's a soft metal, it's malleable, etc. It has a brilliant luster. Not one of those things tell you what silver is. It only tells you what it's like or what it does. It doesn't tell you what silver is. We don't know what makes silver be silver. We know there are 2 principles in it, one called matter and one called form, but we'll deal with that later. So they're all signs of the nature of silver. There's another kind of science, mathematics, philosophy. Let's say man, for instance. This one is called philosophical or ontological. In other words, we're dealing with the being, the very being of the thing. That's what that means. It's also called noetic. Noetic again, knowledge. Via in Greek, as it's pronounced, means through. We've got it in English, diarrhea, through. So that's what in modern science they've been building up vocabulary based more upon Greek. It used to be Latin, but now they're swinging more towards Greek. So the two modes of science, empirical, which only tells you the signs of the nature silver. Why is silver distinct from gold? Well, you can say it has more electronic forces around the electrons, etc., and so many rings of circulation of and so many positrons and neutrons. That's not it. That's only signs of it. That's only our mathematical way of expressing it. That's all that is. So, but this kind of thing, this kind of science, man is a laughy being. He's a talking being. Other animals don't talk. They make passion sounds, but they don't talk. We'll see that later. He's also a social being. He's a political being. He's an artistic being. He's a musical being. Well, some of us are. Somebody sitting in front of me takes a note. You want the note to be here, and she's up here somewhere. Isn't that right, Jenna? Musical. And a scientific being. Even the most primitive man can be curious and wants to know what happened here and what happens there. Now, why has man got all this? Because he's rational. So, this is the cause of that, this is the cause of that, this is the cause of that. We'll be dealing with these later. That's the cause of that, that's the cause of that, and that's the cause of that. That's why. The anthropologist discovers that men have this. If somebody starts speaking, like a country like New Guinea, that little island, the north of Australia, it's a big island actually. Part of it belongs to Indonesia and part of it used to belong to Australia till we liberated it. And there are 1,700 languages. There are only about 7,000 languages in the world. 1,700 of them from one island. The people living here don't know that the people there, they've never spoken to them. But they know there are people there, they can see the fires, cooking fires coming up. It's a very mountainous country. And they can see the people here, can see the people there, or there's their fires, but they dare not go near them. Or they find themselves in the cooking pot later. I heard one of them say, my wife makes lovely soup. So, empirical and philosophical are two modes of science. The things which we often call science, in our everyday loose terms, they're empirical sciences. But don't tell me that mathematics is not a science, and geometry and algebra, they're sciences. Distinction between what we call discrete and continuous sciences. So, the two modes of science, empirical, we only study the signs of the nature. But in the philosophical, we study the natures themselves as cause of the signs. Two different modes of science. This one, we can only apply it to certain things. It's too penetrating. For instance, we do not know why an ant and an elephant are different. The ant was chopped off the elephant. And the elephant, we only know that they're different in size. They appear to have the same number of senses, perhaps. What's that about the noisy oyster? There used to be a rhyme about the noisy oyster. In the bottom of the sea, it stamped its feet, made a lot of noise. But an oyster seems to have just taste, or is it just touch? The least something can have is touch. Whether it's got taste or not, I doubt it, but it's very difficult to determine these things. Somebody please attend to that. Switch it off.
No, you get turn the knob to the left. The black knob on the
Black knob at the wall there, that's right.
Right there. Oh, right there.
Just here,
Joe.
on the wall.
Just turn it.
To the left.
9 o'clock.
Thank you. So, but we know they look different, but what makes one be one and the other be different? Why are they so different? All we can observe is that. We call these scientia quia in Latin. Science is that. All we know is that it does this, that it does that. We don't know why. We call these scientia propter quid. Sciences on account of which we know why it's laughing animal. Because he's rational. Why is he a talking animal? Because he's rational. Why is a man a social animal? Because he's rational. Don't be fooled by like the three girls I called the three harpies in a class I taught in Ottawa. They said, but dogs communicate. And I was talking about man alone is a talking animal. Dogs communicate. I said, that's right. Two dogs on the street having intercourse. They're communicating. But they're not talking. It's not speech. Speech is conventionally significative. It's a rational act, and it's a convention between men. Like, for instance, I remember in Australia, when we were kids, we'd always say about, oh, I saw a beautiful nag down the road. Horse. Somebody in Canada, a man said, mouchoir. What did he say? Mouchoir. Cheval. It's slang French for cheval, meaning a horse. But horse, the name horse is a convention. It's just has signification that's purely conventional. That's all. And that's what language is, human language. But if you hear Australian kookaburras laughing, that's not laughter, that's the matter of laughter. Or if you hear animals that have been taught to speak, like the Australian parrots, we have billions of parrots in Australia, and you can train them to speak, but it's only the matter of speech. We've got one in Australia that speaks, I've heard it speak 10 languages, magnificently. It's called a tape recorder. So don't be fooled by those people who claim, oh, there's a little difference between man and an animal. Very little difference, they claim. There's an infinite difference, my friends. You never cross the gulf. And the reason is because man is rational. He's able to reason. He's able to think. Never mind whether he's got a thumb that can touch the little fingers. Some anthropologists say all sorts of nonsensical stuff because they have no knowledge of philosophy. Man is man because he's rational. And all these other things are consequences of him being rational. So, there are two modes of science. And we've got to learn, above all, to be guardian of the proofs, guardian of the principles of reason, which point out these things to us. Some sciences cross two domains. For instance, mathematics would fall into this kind of science. But what they do sometimes is they weld or wed mathematics with chemistry, mathematics with physics, mathematics with botany. When we were studying botany in the University of Sydney, we were taught how to trace fluids going through, say, a tree. You know, we took just a little branch and hooked a tube to it, something like this. We had the branch, say, and we had a tube attached to it here. This represents the tube. This is glass here. That's rubber there, and it's glass here. Then here, another tube is attached in a beaker of water. And this glass tubing here, it had measures along it, so many inches. And we timed it, how much water came up from here, and went out through the leaves. And one of these trees out here could lift a 3-ton truck with the water it lifts during the day. The pressure is so great. It could lift a 3-ton truck. But that was all mathematics and botany welded together. We call that a middle science. It's not empirical entirely. It's not ontological entirely. Actually, it's not ontological. It's not pure mathematics, in other words, but it's mathematical physics, physical science. Now, with the philosophy of man, or philosophical psychology, if you look at the old books, the most wonderful books which you cannot buy today, I have several of these, Psychologia Philosophica. Pardon me, they all wrote in Latin, you know, up till about the 17th century. Everybody wrote in Latin. And they called it philosophical psychology. We could call it philosophy of man. Some call it philosophical anthropology. Others call it philosophy of human nature. And when I call it philosophy of man, which had also, in the French language, for instance, they seem to prefer that, la philosophie de l'homme, the philosophy of man. And boy, did a couple of the feminists at Niagara University go berserk because I said philosophy of man. They were notable, by the way, as a gentleman sitting in front of me here will bear out, he was her student one time, that she knew less about philosophy than a dog did. He's grinning away to himself there. So, my friends, the nature of the philosophy of man, what we're going to do is first of all study bodily things. What makes a bodily thing be a bodily thing and be different from another bodily thing? Rocks, trees, animals, man. We have to study them first to find out what the basic principles are. Then we're going to examine plants. And we're going to study plant psychology to find out what makes plants and be living things and what their functions are. Then we're going to study animals and study the various animal lives to find out what goes on in them in a general way. We're not going to study giraffes and dogs and ants and things like that. But what makes plants be plants, what makes dogs be dogs, if you like. Now we do that so we can find out precisely what is the difference between them and man. We're going to do a contrast between the two. We're going to make a study that will enable us to be more perfect in understanding human nature. But let's have a look, first of all, about the division of philosophy. How many sciences are there in philosophy? There are 5 basic sciences. That's what I want to do now. I feel a bit restricted on this board, but I think we'll clean this off, then we'll be better off. I don't want to go too fast. I don't want to take you out of your depth, and that's quite easy when you attend a class at first, but I'll see that you understand it, believe me. So, in philosophy, there are 5 sciences. That's Ph in Greek, and we always use that as a sloppy way of writing out the full thing. First, there's instrumental philosophy, called logic. I'm sorry I'm having trouble writing on this board. Never could write on one of these. Instrumental philosophy. It's the instrument that philosophy uses, logic. Then there's principle philosophy. This is the main part of philosophy, where all the principles are established. First we study speculative. By the way, this will all be in your notes when I put them on the computer for you. Then practical philosophy. I'm going to write 2 more here and 2 more here. Speculative philosophy. Speculum, or in Latin, means a mirror, and speculare means to look. It's the subjects we're going to look at for the sake of knowing. This is knowing for the sake of knowing. That's what a speculative science is. Speculating, just looking at it. Forget about markets, the money markets and all that sort of thing. We're speculating. It's a very sore point with a lot of us, isn't it? But think of just gazing in wonderment at reality. There's a lovely book written by a fellow named Keene. I haven't had it in my hands for at least 15 years. It's somewhere in my library. Keene, he wrote on wonderment. Aristotle spoke about wonderment. We wonder, what is it? What's going on there? I got myself lost in the bush once in Australia because I was wondering and forgot to stop. I went up to this famous Pigeon Loft mountain and then decided I'd better get out. The sun was sinking. I'd better go and rescue myself. And as I'm going out of the bush, I discovered that the Pacific Ocean, which was on my right hand coming up, was on my right hand again going down. So I knew I was going the wrong way. Fortunately, I got out of that. But curiosity drove me on. That's just curiosity, not studiosity. I just want to see the Pacific Ocean and the coast of New South Wales from up, right up in the sky, as it were. However, That's speculative. Practical is knowing for the sake of doing. Knowing for the sake of knowing, knowing for the sake of doing. That's the difference. Now, in knowing for the sake of knowing, we have, first of all, philosophy of nature. Then we have philosophy of being. Philosophy of being is called metaphysics. Philosophy of nature is divided into two parts: cosmology, I'm writing badly, and philosophical psychology, which we're going to study. And we'll do a little bit of cosmology too. Now, metaphysics, there are sort of three parts to metaphysics. One is called, and I detest this name, epistemology. We call it defensive metaphysics in Australia. And that's what I find the old Latin works called it too. Epistemology, although I was a specialist in that with my doctoral research, etc. It means, can we be certain of anything? Can we know the truth? What is truth? How are we certain? What causes certitude? All those things. And what things can we be certain of? Can we be certain of concrete facts? The book is on the table. Can we be certain of this kind of thing? Every man is mortal, etc. What can we be certain of? That's epistemology. Then we study being itself, the very ontology. We study existence itself. What does it mean for something to exist? How many kinds of existence are there? What are the properties of beings that exist? We find they're all something, they're all one, they're all true, they're all good. And on account of being true and good, they're all beautiful. We study those things. So that's ontology. Then the third part is called natural theology. I've got to get used to writing on this board again. The thing slips under and you can't control it too well. Natural theology, which leads some people to think that we teach religion, it says this: is there a God? It investigates that. Some say no. Why do they say no? So we look particularly at David Hume and Immanuel Kant and see why some philosophers argue against the idea of a God. So we look into that. Then we find out, are there any flaws in their arguments, etc. Then we look at proofs that are given by great men from the past. We look at them. We find there are 5 ways of proving that there is a God with utter certitude. So that's, you see, ontology is dealing with the causes of beings. What's the relationship between a being and a relation? Here's a rational being, a mental being. Jenna, also known as Tweety Bird, is right near me. Now she's far from me. You can't see nearness and farness. You understand that. You can see her, you can see me, but you can't see the nearness. That's an intelligible being. So we study those things in ontology. In natural theology, we say this: can we be certain of anything? Can we... I'm sorry, I went too far there. I was thinking of epistemology. Natural theology is, can we be certain that there's an ultimate cause of the whole of reality? I smile when I hear about the Great Bang. I really smile when I hear that. They never ask a question. All right, what was before the Great Bang? They don't ask that. Talk a lot of... I nearly said bloody twaddle, but you know I don't say bloody in the classroom, do I? I nearly said twaddle. So that's what natural theology investigates. Now, in the practical order, since we discover, as we shall prove, man has free will. So we ask this question. We prove that here in the study we're going to do. Ethics, or also called moral philosophy, that again leads people to think that we're teaching religion. By the way, the pro-life office in Buffalo said to me, passed a question on to me when we studied ethics about 18 months ago. From what biblical perspective are you going to come from? What the hell are you talking about? Biblical perspective, I mean, that presumes we're not studying philosophy at all, but studying theology. That's what that presumes. But however, that was a silly question. The office, I think, thought it was a bit odd. But anyway, ethics deals with this. Since man, we prove, has free will, is there a way he ought to act? Should he rape? Should he murder? Should he kidnap? Should he steal? Should he betray his country? All those sorts of things. How one ought to behave. That's what ethics is about. How one ought to behave. So we have to study that. We find there's a measure for that. There are two measures. One, a personal measure we call conscience, and the other one is the natural law, is an objective. But we won't go into that. That's not our course now. So ethics deals with the individual, the family, and civil society. And when I'm hearing our politicians speak, I think, oh, good God, it's a pity they didn't stop sometime to take a study of this, particularly of this here. A lot of people need to do a lot of study. Public life today, I call this a dark age. And I really mean that. This is a dark age. There are things that once, say, in the 13th century, questions men wouldn't have thought of asking. They knew the answer before they asked the question. So, in civil society, when I hear our politicians, it frightens me to think that those men are going to be in charge of the country, one of them at least. Then poetics. That's the philosophy of art, technology, aesthetics. This one deals with human behavior, ethics does. Poetics deals with the product of human behavior. About 100 years ago, I think when I was about 25, I can remember a lot of discussion taking place. You don't have to laugh at that, Maria. A lot of discussion taking place about art versus morality. It might be beautiful art. If I put Tweety Bird here, something there, a drawing of her, it might be to say, oh, he's a good artist. But it might portray her in some obscene manner. And I know Jenna well enough to say she'd come up straight here and punch me in the nose, which I deserve. But the big distinction between being artistic, but whether you ought to do that or not, that's ethics. Big distinction between the two. Might be magnificent artwork. A man might be a marvellous leader in society, but what he's leading the people into may be terrible. So there's the layout of philosophy. There's one science, there's 2, 3, 4, 5. And those sciences give us an insight into the whole of reality. There's nothing that's not contained in that. That's why philosophy studies all things. The philosophy of geology would be contained in cosmology. A man came to see Woodbury. Father Woodbury was the greatest mind I have studied under. I've been under men of Paris and you name it. Canada, United States, Australia, and many European men. For instance, what the Marxists called in Paris the leading Marxist who knew more about Marx than anybody was a Jesuit. Father Yves Calvez was our professor of Marxism. I learnt more in one night from Woodbury than I learnt a whole semester from Father Yves Calvez. And this man, Dr. Koch, K-O-C-H, came from Egypt to Australia. And Woodbury showed him the 4 Aristotelian causes in here, how rocks and things are made up of. I remember the night he said it. My God, I've been looking for that all my life, he said. He was German extraction, but teaching in an Egyptian university. I've been looking for that all my life. That was his exclamation. So, we're going to see a myriad of wonderful things, my friends. And the nature of the philosophy of man is such that it will give us great insight into reality, into the universe, all living things, but especially man. I shudder when I see students becoming psychologists. I heard a mile of them studying with me at different times. They're studying in a department or a psychology faculty or something like that. Like the faculty, which was a graduate faculty in Ottawa, Father Laplante and I sat there one day. We were two specialists in epistemology, which the psychology faculty should have been in collaboration with. We sat one day and talked to them in an office there. They'd never heard of the things we teach in epistemology, dealing with the certitude that goes on in the human intellect and how it operates. They'd never heard of it. Like the student said to me, nobody knows what the human mind is. I'd rather you express that a different way. Say, you don't know what the human mind is. That's the truth, not what you said before. Aristotle, 25 centuries ago, wrote beautifully on this. But it took a master like Aquinas to take him beyond that. Right beyond it. And a man like Maritain and a Woodbury and men like that who perfected even there by elaborating certain parts of it. We stop there, my friends, for a quick coffee break. Now the coffee, I must thank Sister and Mr. Killian especially, who have been looking after us with coffee.
I hope we have enough tonight.
I nearly brought some too.
Limit 3/4 of a cup per person.
But what I must have.
There's enough.
But could I have your attention, please? Could I have your attention, please? I want to remind you, Mr. Killian, would you look after this? The attendance sheet and the cards. Fill the cards in according to those 5 things I had on the board. One thing I'd like to say is, these people bring this coffee in. They have a cup there. If you have a few coins you'd like to throw in some time or another, they're very welcome. But you don't have to pay for the coffee. It's just that they supply it out of their own pockets, and they're retired people. I'd like to see a little help. Thank you.